One reason why is because this turbine blade is not separate blades. It's one entire piece of metal machined. It's just an incredible machining done. The dry weight, empty weight of this engine is 78 pounds. That's all it is. It weighs 78 pounds. It puts out 780 pounds of thrust. You could take this engine and render every piston reciprocating engine obsolete overnight just with this aircraft alone. That was supposed to power a number of advanced general aviation transportation systems that we were supposed to be flying today, yet it's not happened yet. And I think we're all waiting for that to happen. Here is the actual NASA release with the FJX-2 on the right side. Eclipse 500 originally had this Williams International engine, but it never came true. They actually changed their engine. They're no longer using the Williams engine. Now, separated by a large curtain at this Norton Air Force Base exhibit were 3 of these particular craft. They measured 2460. The largest one was 130 feet in diameter. It used off-the-shelf components. Many of the components, including these CCD cameras, were taken directly off the Vegas casinos. Now, along the circumference of the crew compartment, we see that there were 6 CCD cameras, 1 on top for a total of 7. They could all be slewed in conjunction and produce an artificial image on the inside of the pilot's visor, directly like the Apache helicopter. It uses 4 ACES-2 seat ejection systems taken directly off the F-4 Phantom. There was a central column down the center of the aircraft. The composite panels were partially removed, showing some of the interior components of the craft. And the aerospace engineer who I talked to said that this thing had fingerprints all over it. It looked like it had been around for decades, just decades. There was a 12-foot diameter Tesla coil in this location, and then there were a number of capacitor plates along the bottom of the craft here. Now, the question is, how did this thing operate? How did it fly? A very, very high voltage electrical charge was fed into this Tesla coil via 2 deep cycle marine batteries. Once that happens, there's a magnetic field that forms above this craft in the form of a toroid donut. And by way of this rheostat device right here, the pilot had the capability of overlaying the field lines directly onto these capacitor plates, causing pitch, yaw, and roll. And you could vary the voltage of these capacitor plates. This goes back to what's called the B-field-Brown effect, where Mr. T. Townsend Brown in the late 1920s, early 1930s started experimenting with charged capacitor plates, and he found out that when you charge a capacitor plate to very high voltage, positive on one side and negative on the other, there's a resultant movement in the direction of the positive charge, and that's what's happening here. Here you see a articulated arm that may be used for off-planet recovery of satellites or something further than that. Air Force officer from Gung Ho, February 1988. We are flight testing vehicles that defy description. To compare them conceptually to the SR-71 would be like comparing Leonardo da Vinci's parachute design to the space shuttle. Exactly what we're talking about with electrogravitic propulsion systems. A retired Air Force colonel said, "We have things that are so far beyond the comprehension of the average American aviation authority as to be really alien to our way of thinking." Now, the U.S. Air Force NEPA program, that stands for Nuclear Energy for Propulsion of Aircraft. The program started in 1946, it ran to 1951. It was replaced by something called the Aircraft Nuclear Propulsion Program that went from 51 to 58. Now that procured a number of aircraft, including the NB-36, the Convair X-6, the Convair Model NX-2, and something called the Heat Transfer Reactor Experiment. Here is the NB-36 in flight. It never flew with the reactor on, but it flew with the reactor on board. There was 10,000 pounds of lead shielding up here to protect the pilot. So 10,000 pounds of fuel that could not be used. Here is the Convair atomic powered bomber. It never went into production. And then this is a different version here of almost the same similar configuration. A good shot of the only known picture we have of a nuclear powered jet engine. It was designed and ran. Soviets were the first to run this